All right, where do we leave off? Component testing, we're talking about what it's all about, how it works, mocking. Okay, let's talk about like who does this now. This is where QA automation engineers really shine. They own the whole thing. They're writing test plans. They're writing test cases. They're this stuff. They're integrating it into pipelines. A huge number of test cases pretty easily once you get it set up. That's why it's kind of on the wider end of the pyramid, and you get some real bang for your buck. In terms of test frameworks, like I said, this is a great place. I like to use Cucumber. That's my favorite thing. Really well at this layer. BDD is essentially behavior-driven. Figure out acceptance criteria, you figure out how to those, and you figure out how to automate it as a team, like as a community, right? And the reason our natural domains to that. And then the underlying step definitions are in developers contribute to that. Not brittle and run fast. The right place to introduce those tests to run them is not by a person, but as part of a build pipeline. Whenever there's a commit or a merge, these things can get spun up quickly. You can run through hundreds of test cases in a matter of seconds or minutes. And if one of them fails, you don't let the build continue. You don't let that product go out. People get alerted. You need to get on there and either fix your or fix might be. And again, adversarial testing works good at this layer as well. I think I mentioned that. So now we're taking two or more of those things, those individual services or components that we just tested, and wiring them together. And they talk to each other, that the contract is honored. There's probably not a lot of reason to recreate the correctness testing you might have done in the last layers. But like I said before, that wasn't covered well in the component layer. Now we're going to cover it good in the layer. There are still some things that need to be mocked. But one of the things that I found works really great at this layer is now that we don't really have to do adversarial testing here anymore, is to introduce this notion of a simulator. I work at a place where our code is very dependent on hardware that may or may not exist. And we have a team that actually spends time writing simulators instead of my code running a mock and enforcing a behavior. Now there's going to be some logic in its own little separate chunk of code that's the simulator and knows how to respond to inputs. Like, for example, if we needed to model a battery system, over time it knows how to increase voltage or decrease voltage if you're discharging or charging the battery. Up, and we're combining more pieces, and the simulator now behaves more like real world testing. Well, right now, we are writing our integration tests in JUnit, unfortunately, but there's this effort we have now that we have a pretty good Cucumber suite being built at the component layer. We're asking, well, why can't I bring some or all of those tests or some version of those tests layer? I mean, I'm kind of sending inputs the same way, and I'm looking at the outputs the same way as some of the component tests were. So we're going to try that as an experiment here in the coming months, and maybe I'll report back to you next year how that went. But why not? If Cucumber is this great tool that lets you work at this layer as well. These tests. I like to think that QA and the automation engineers pair up on this kind of stuff. The QA folks are already the subject matter experts. They've been working on here for a while. automation people show up and they're like, well, what should I automate? Like Ron and I get in these arguments all the time about like, what should we automate? Better yet, what shouldn't you automate? And we end up having things like our teams are pairing up and solving that problem together. Of this layer that may not be in the others is this notion of reporting. It runs and it spits out a report, pass fails. We like to use Allure. So that that the failures and the broken tests can be triaged more effectively. Now, why is that important here? Well, like as we go up the pyramid, things are getting more brittle. Tests tend to break for various weird reasons. Just the other week, the devs went and fixed a Coverity problem by updating some libraries, and we suddenly had these tests that only fail under weird conditions, and it was really. But having a report out tells you where to go focus your efforts on triaging the problems, right? And because at this layer now, with the brittleness, tests might be failing because the test was bad. The environment where you're testing in changed. Assumptions that you made got broken. Or there's a real bug. And because when you're trying to put together a release and they're waiting for you to say like, hey, is this ready or not? It's like, well, I got to hang on. I got to go triage these 12 failures to make sure we're not missing a real bug, right? And when they're in a hurry. That whole process to me acts like resistance to scaling. So if you're trying to scale up your organization and you're putting a lot of time and effort at the top and you end up spending more time triaging than actually writing tests, that's this resistance to scaling. You got to add people things instead of the right things. The other trick about this layer too is like, well, when do you execute? I can't execute it in my build pipeline because it's too slow, it's too brittle. I can't be failing a build every day. We got to, people are going to get upset about that. And I can't run it on post deployment. There's still some simulators and mocks in there. It doesn't quite fit into the real world. So what do? Well, we actually end up running it manually at release time as a release regression test. And that's why I've been talking about like releases and things. That seems to be a pretty good time to run this, as long as you can do the dates. Which we get. So here is now run as close to real world as possible. Get rid of all your mocks, get rid of your simulators if you can. Plug things in together in the real world and sit in front of UI and run through the system.
It's sad.
In our world because they're hard to come by and not always available. So we still do that at this layer. And the brittleness problem becomes a lot worse at this layer. So you end up spending more time triaging fewer because you're going to have a lot more work triaging things. So I realized that in the last couple of companies I worked at, there's also this notion of an analytics team, right? They're making these reports and they're either giving them or selling them to your customers to prove that your product does what it's supposed to be doing. And this becomes a whole new product line. And to me, that's another end of the end-to-end testing, right? Why don't we also, instead of just always using the UI, make sure that the analytics database is correctly populated and the reports are coming out correct? So we're working on a way to automate that. Automating, looking at PDFs is hard. That probably still requires things. Have QA and the automation engineers paired up and working on the tests at this layer. It's the UI testing. You've all used Selenium and Cypress and things like that. And we're always looking for a better way to kind of do that. The AI talk this morning was kind of
Super.
it's a lot of the same things that I talked about in the integration layer. So I think that's it for my parts.
Get it on here. Now that people can hear me. Yeah, so I'll get extending the. Yeah. I mean, there, additional automation. All the way through. You need to be doing all of the test automation. What is your metric? Is it QA? And that made we're so into it at the end of do I throw it forward? Usually. You could, like I said, you could sort of excruciating. If it doesn't work, it's a QA problem. But anyways, so I wanted to sort of wrap up on that, the why.
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to kind of summarize a lot of the things that I've already been saying all along, right? You're trying to decompose your landscape into these layers of a testing pyramid and try to keep your emphasis at the bottom of it, not at the top, where things are slow and expensive and brittle. And I like the idea of having, QA automation engineers working on these things along with QA as well as the rest of the organization if you're doing BDD. And so, yeah, everybody has a part to play. So try and involve them. Quality is everybody's responsibility, right? Not just QAs.
That QA, why is it broken?
Yeah.
You're telling yourself.
Why can't we ship tomorrow? Holding us back.
All right, thank you.